Well, let's talk about all this with political analyst Dr. Levy Ndou. Good morning, and thank you so much for your time as always. They've waited 28 years, I think is what they've said. We've campaigned for these things to be addressed for 28 years now, and now it's the time for a new strategy and tactics in how we do things. And of course, we know the developments this year, which I've just mentioned to our viewers, Levi, about the formation of the GNU. They haven't held back. They've said exactly how they feel about it. What do you make of the timing of all of this now? I mean, we'll talk about the outings that they've had in going it alone in 2017 in just a moment, but what this represents for the alliance itself.
Good morning, Iman. Good morning to the viewers at home. This is not a new discussion. It could be how certain words are being put by those that are in the alliance, and specifically the South African Communist Party. There has been a talk in the past that was talking about the political center within the alliance. And at the time, there were those who were advocating that within the alliance, there should be the political center, which has to be led by the SACP. And of course, those were the discussions at the time, which ended up being defeated because as things stand now, in the alliance, the leader of the alliance is the SACP, is the ANC rather, and that has been the case all the time. All these other alliance partners have always played a supportive role to the ANC. And of course, when you have the ANC campaigning and forming government, they would do that also considering the fact that they are in alliance with the alliance partners. And that is why you'd always get alliance partners being accommodated and given positions in government. At the same time, there are issues that will relate to how the alliance partners relate to one another or threatening each other, which appears to have angered some of the alliance partners for quite some time. The issue at point now being that some within the SACP and broadly in the South African population, some could feel that maybe things could have been done differently, specifically when it comes to the formation of the GNU. And when we talk about the timing, there's never a good timing in politics because anything can happen at any given time. But what we are very lucky about is that the position of the SACP through its Secretary General is well known, and what could be the longest week for us will be to wait and find out exactly what then is going to be the decision of the conference come the end of the week.
Yeah, you mentioned the General Secretary is giving a news conference at 1 o'clock today. We're just sharing that with our viewers. What are the configurations? What does a reconfiguration look like?
The reconfiguration, in the view of many, and specifically from those that are coming from the SACP, would talk to structural arrangements within the alliance. They will talk to power relations, who therefore is in charge of the alliance, and decision-making in terms of how they actually shape their way forward as alliance partners. And in the view of many, it appears as if the view of the SACP and many is that maybe they should enter into an alliance as equal partners, because for quite some time, you'd hear people like the SACP saying many decisions are being taken whilst they've not been consulted, and they're also only being used during election times, and beyond that, the level of consultation is quite very, very poor.
As equal partners, you say, but how would that happen how can they coexist as equal partners in a GNU configuration?
I think that those are some of the issues that they need to sit down and discuss. But the issue that, in my view, has to be looked at very seriously by the SACP, and I think that is the view of some coming from the ANC is that the ANC has lost power. The ANC was supposed to sit, which they did, or consult with as many political parties as possible, which happened. Some parties were available to participate in the GNU, some were not available to participate in the GNU, and the ANC had to work with those that were available, which were the Democratic Alliance, the IFP, and many other political parties. That is what the SACP, in my view, has to look at and consider whether the view of the SACP is that maybe there should not be the GNU and the ANC should go and look for new partners. That is something that still has to come out of this conference. Whether the SACP is saying maybe there should be a dissolution of the GNU and move towards fresh elections, those are some of the issues that, in my view, there still has to look at. But crucially, the SACP still has to come out clear beyond this conference and explain whether indeed they are going to go it alone during the local government elections, which therefore will be able to test the strength of the SACP at different levels of society in South Africa, and indeed to test whether indeed they can be able to stand alone and make a political difference when it comes to elections.
Yeah, and as you're speaking, I mean, I'm going to be giving my age away here, Levi, you know, thinking almost 18 years ago to news conferences I've attended with the SACP where this was the wish and the desire expressed about going it alone. So that's in the context of the alliance, as you say. We'll wait to hear what permutations around a reconfiguration might be on the table when we hear from the leadership of the SACP, and indeed during the course of their meetings until Saturday. Perhaps there'll be an announcement. But let's look at the strength of the SACP on its own to go it alone and to contest 2026 local government elections. So they have something in their playbook that will, you know, that can be a predictor for how things might go. You think about 2017, the Metsi Maholo by-election, success there was limited. You know, whether they'd be able to bring something that does captivate their potential voter base. What might that be? I mean, could they stand alone in your view?
My view is that the SACP should firstly do an honest assessment about the state of their organization and make a determination as to whether they can be able to contest elections and win, because each party that will contest elections will do so for the purposes of winning. They need to make an assessment of their own branches, make assessment of the caliber of people that they can forward for elections, make an assessment for their financial resources, and do a very honest audit of their own membership, and therefore test if indeed they can still be able to contest elections on their own. Another aspect, in my view, that the SACP has to look at is that they need to ensure that they put emotions aside and convince, and which in my view could be the first step, convince these SACP members that are part of the GNU to pull out of the GNU so that we are able to identify true communists or true members of the SACP and those that are in the ANC, because there is another element that the SACP could be overlooking, which is about the dual membership of those that are in the SACP, whether they are more of a SACP or more of ANC. And that is what, in my view, the SACP has to do, because they might assume that they've got numbers, whilst some of them are actually more ANC than SACP.
So one of the Congress's, one of the big things that they're working towards by the end of this meeting is their manifesto for the 2026 elections. And the obvious question would be, what is their competitive advantage?
Well, I think their manifesto would be very clear. Anyone who has been following the the Communist Party, the Socialist group, the left political ideological spectrum would know that when the SACP has to talk about its manifesto, it has to be biased towards the poor, biased towards the marginalized, ensure that the country has to move towards a purely socialist country, and ensuring that the views of those that are in the left are properly expressed and articulated in the corridors of government. Equally, they should also be able to identify themselves from other political parties that considers themselves to be on the left, talking about the EFF, the MK party, and indeed, they should also know that when they contest elections, the pool of voters remains the same South Africans who have been voting and new voters, but there are no new members or new people that are going to come out from anywhere else. So the pool of where they are supposed to be fishing remains where the ANC has been fishing, remains the very same pool that the DA and other political parties have been relying on for votes.